Hello, everybody. Welcome to the contributors meeting. I'm gonna be your host today. I'm Leo, and starting off with triage and discussion. So I was the person doing triage last week. So I took a look at the open discussions and open issues. There's only one that highlighted to me that maybe I thought about bringing to this group is this is a feature request in Argo CD. Basically, the user is documenting a feature where every Argo CD user would be entering a message on every change. So basically, they want to record the change in Argo CD directly. So I provided some directions here. Not sure if they're if we want to have that as part of the use of the Argo CD experience. So in Argo CD, there are many places where we can manipulate resources and change the state. So I think it will be a bit of a annoying experience, but I wanted to hear if someone in the call has a similar uh, idea or think this should be a nice feature to have.
My appetite for features for the 20% is very, very low. If we thought this were the 80%, maybe I'd be down, but this is a lot of UI code, potentially CLI code, potentially getting into the territory of like needing to be compliance hardened.
Right.
Eh.
Yeah, I share the same opinion. So I provided some directions here and also suggested them to take a look at the ephemeral access. Maybe that could answer some of these questions. So let's see. Yeah, other than that, nothing else. Not sure, Nitish, you were the second on support on doing triage. Do you have anything to bring up today for us?
Not really, not really.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so that's it for triage and discussion. We just need to select two people for doing it next week. Any volunteers in the call?
I could primary it.
Okay, thank you, Michael. So we need someone else to do secondary.
Secondary.
Okay, Blake.
Yep.
All right, where are you, Blake?
I'm in the bottom quarter.
Oh yeah, here you are. Cool. All right. Thanks, everybody. And moving on with the discussion topics we had for the week. So Blake, you have two. I think it was planned to be presented last week and we moved to this week. So you want me to share? You want to take the share yourself? Up to you.
You can go ahead.
Okay.
I'll just go on the bottom.
All right.
So, I mean, this is not a uncommon-ish. I mean, it is relatively uncommon, but the gist of it is, as you probably know, is that if Git exits uncleanly, or if the repo server restarts uncleanly, then sometimes in some repos there's index lock files. Uh, in most cases, that's not problematic, but we had a customer that had, on the topic of giant Git repos, and then it becomes kind of obnoxious to redeploy the whole pods, and then they download a 5 gig Git repo. So, I mean, so basically, like a simple way would be in the init method of well, like when the repo server starts, would be to just check for Git index lock, remove it, reinitialize the index. I guess the problem here is that this isn't an exhaustive fix, because of course this can happen in other use cases. But I'm just wondering. I just want to get some of your thoughts on how this could be fixed. I mean, because I don't think that a exhaustive fix where, like, for all cases where, like, there's like, if Git crashes, then there's an index lock while repo server is running, would I don't think it would, but I think we could at least solve for a lot of the use cases. Let's say if the repo server crashes, and then then it restarts, and then when on the init of the repo server, we can just check for index lock, reinit if it's present for Git repos that are still present, and then basically reinit the index. Just want to get your thoughts on that.
Is there a way to find out if that log file is stale? Does Git provide something like that?
Problems, yeah. As far as I as far as I know, there's no way to know if it's stale. I mean, we could definitely do like a check on like how old the index lock file is. I don't know if that's a great way of doing it, but it's a way.
Just out
Yeah,
of
maybe.
curiosity, I'm sorry, go ahead. Continue though.
And no, I was just wondering if, um, and that's probably very, very deep into Git internals. I don't know if Git is updating that index log, right? Like when it performs operations, does it like, update the last modified time of the index.log?
So
That's that. So,
so basically what happens like whenever Git does like a Git like any kind of Git operation, index lock or like which affects the index, it would basically touch an index lock. And then as soon as the operation is done, then it deletes the index lock. So in most cases, like as long as it's doesn't crash midway, it's all good because there's no index lock to worry about. It's for the use cases when for whatever reason either Git or the repo server itself crashes, and then there's a lingering.
does it write like a PID into the index log, or is it just an empty file?
That I would need to verify. I think it's an empty file, but I can check.
Because if it would write a PID into that, right? I mean, we
Yeah,
could check if that PID
that is
is
true.
running, right? If that PID still exists, and if it's a Git uh, image, like if the process name is Git.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the issue there is that it would be like the Git. I mean, it would be basically like whenever the Git client starts, it wouldn't be the if this is if this is the way it works, it wouldn't be like the Git the PID of the Git binary that has started and then it just stops and then it's something else. I'm not sure.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think. Do you do you think that Git forks another process to
I'd have to double
handle?
check.
Yeah, we can at least check it, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
like how often does it happen that Git crashes? I mean, have you seen that in a while?
I haven't seen Git myself, but I definitely so it has happened when the repo servers crashed for whatever reason. I mean, this actual use case was like the repo server pod OM'd and then it's restart the container. But since it's just a container that restarts, it doesn't reinitialize the
Oh,
temp folder. But even if it did, that's kind of obnoxious to still download again another 5 gig.
right.
But that only matters if you've manually set up a persistent volume to hold your temp directory, right? Because by default, we just blow everything away.
Well, that's the problem because the temp there only gets reinitialized when the pod itself restarts, not
Yeah.
when the container restarts.
Okay. Yep, yep, yep. I think we also have like protection in Argo CD against parallel Git operations. So I feel like we should always be pretty safe just blowing this away and reinitializing when we encounter an index lock error. Yeah, Alex's suggestion, just wipe the temp folder. I don't really want to go that way because people do have these big mono repos that are
Yeah,
nice to keep around and not reinitialize, but that would be that would do the job.
Or
yeah.
we could just wipe all the log files specifically on
That's
continuing restart.
that's what I was
Yeah.
thinking. So I have like I haven't submitted PR for it, but I do have something like that. And it's probably not good for all use cases, but it would at least solve for some of that and hopefully
I guess
avoid the whole. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess the only thing that we need to make sure is what Jan was saying, right? So make sure that when we are deleting those log files, we're not deleting valid log files. Maybe some of them are valid and it shouldn't be deleted. So if there is a way to identify the PID and see if the process is still running or something like that, uh, by looking at the log file, maybe this is something we need to investigate in this PR.
Sure.
I think I think that locking already exists, Leo. I think all the operations which should introduce an index.lock happen on a per repo server process
Right.
mutex. So I think we're in good shape there. And if we aren't, if there are places where we're doing Git operations concurrently that take out an index.lock, um, we probably just need to fix our own locking logic.
Yeah, think about plugins.
Okay.
Like I think, oh wait, no, with the CMP, they
It's
get a copy, right, of
Yeah,
the
they get an ephemeral
repository.
copy.
Yeah, it's yeah. I was thinking in the old fashion where the plugin would run within the repository server, not particular checkout. No, yeah,
so
no.
what's the approach? Wipe the log files on restart or wipe the log files before checking out a repo and starting that locking process in Argo? Because I feel with the second option, we have more chance of getting it wrong by not having the locks at all the right places.
Yeah, I feel like the first one you described.
I think though that like there can be more than one like lock. I think locks can be more fine granular in Git. Like not only like Git couldn't only lock the top level thing, it could also have a lock on I think specific revisions or something like that. But I'm not sure if the top level index.lock is the only thing that we need to care about. Just a thought.
We do have a nice, so I would like to believe that we could just have logic that detects this error and then blows away the index.lock. And I'd like to be able to trust our mutex logic elsewhere. But I'm kind of with Alex. I don't really totally trust it. We do have a nice place where we initialize all the pre-existing temp directories. We go and inspect them. And we're like, okay, this goes with this repo. This goes with this repo. We reconstruct our map. That would be an okay place to just go and clear out all the lock files. That seems okay to me.
I can submit what I have, and then we can discuss in the PR, and we
Right.
can figure out the right course of action.
Cool. Thank you, Blake. All right, moving on. The other one also from you, Blake. Docker Hub.
Yeah. So Dan had assigned me this some time back, and I thought it was something, but then it turns out to be something else. So it seems like it seems like that Docker Hub and private OCI. Let me state what it is. So the gist of it is, if you have an authenticated OCI Helm repo in Docker Hub, like let's say you just use a repository credential, it's bound to like registry one docker.io/Blake. That gets, so the repo server will register that. Well, that will get passed through to the repo server, and then the registry. So then the full repo URL gets set as the registry in Docker Hub, and that basically doesn't work with Docker Hub. Whereas it seems to work fine with so I discussed this with Andrew Block from Red Hat, and it seems to work fine for other implementations, and it seems to be. And if it is what it is, it seems like that private OCI repositories Helm repositories have never worked. If that is the case, I would love to be proven wrong here, but it because I thought it was more of a generic issue with the OCI Helm implementation, but it seems to be something very specific to Docker Hub. And it seems like with the OCI spec, it should be the registry host that should be passed in rather than in the full repo URL in any case. I'm just trying to think if there's any other implications if we were to do that, because I try this out locally, like just use the registry host, works fine. So basically just cut off and if just only add the host when doing the registry login to Helm. That works fine. the full repo URL that gets passed in by default does not work. And I think it would be fine to just do this with the registry host for all implementations, but I would like to get some thoughts on that. Can scroll down to the bottom. I think that's where I summarized what.
Bottom?
Yeah.
This?
Yeah, basically explain what I was saying. Right.
Yeah, I'm personally not familiar with this process and how this authentication works. Not sure if somebody else in the call can provide some direction here. Is this OCI related, Blake?
OCI Helm. So this is for it's not for the OCI feature being built. This is for the existing OCI Helm implementation.
So this line here was expected to work, is that right?
Correct. And that's what would get passed in by default from the repo server. Or rather, no, wait, that's for Quay.io. Let's scroll up for Docker Hub. That actually works as expected. It's I think it's the comment above where I was trying this out for Docker Hub. We'll scroll up a bit.
Scroll up.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the one, yeah.
So Mike, you have your hands raised.
Yeah, I posted it into chat, but we ran into similar problem with Docker Hub itself, and I think some of it was because the login and the redirects are somewhat different, um, because you both have to like opt into two different URLs, I think it is, because like your Helm charts aren't always pulling from registry-1. There's also just the hub.docker.io for the URLs. It's a little bit different than everywhere else. And what we ended up doing to have to make it work was basically do the ECR pass-throughs for OCI repositories in order to make it work. Um, and so there definitely is something tricky with Docker Hub's OCI logins for Helm charts. So there's definitely something that specific to Docker Hub in Argo CD that doesn't work as expected.
Okay, Blake, do you have enough information to continue this investigation? Is something that you're willing to be working on, or
I mean, I'm working on it. I mean, the thing is, I have something locally which would work, but then I'm trying to think if that would somehow basically like what I have locally would be like when this does the registry login for OCI repos, just use the host only rather than passing in the full repo URL. But I'm wondering how that works when this happens with Helm dependency builder. That's the part which is a bit murky for me, because if it's just like pulling the actual if it's just for the initial first pull, I don't think it would be too problematic, because what happens is that the repo server will do the login part, and then it will do the Helm pull, and then afterwards it will log out of the registry, which in theory should be fine. I'm just trying to think if that would. I mean, the only impact I can think would be if someone would have like a Helm repository with multiple dependencies from multiple private dependencies from different users, and I'm not sure if that's a use case which would be common or even worth worrying about. But because I mean, basically just logging in with the registry host that seemed to work fine, and for all use cases, for both for Docker Hub, for Quay.io, you name it, that seems to work fine. But I'm not sure if that is the right fix. Yeah, I can also submit a draft PR and we can
okay,
discuss.
all right. Okay, moving on. You have an additional one, Blake?
Yeah, and that's just can we just merge the OCI?
Is
PR.
another OCI related PR?
Yeah, this is just beseeching the gang to, or rather,
Big one.
yeah.
So
Yeah,
Ishita already reviewed? Yes.
she has given the approval. Do I still like have requests for changes on that one?
You had something, and then I replied, and that was a while ago, though, I think.
Uh, if I don't have scary stuff and if Ashida's already approved, let's smash it.
Merge it, merge it, merge it.
Okay, okay, nice.
Stuff anywhere,
All
Blake.
right.
No, I'm around.
No vacations planned this summer.
I'm going to Croatia, but that's besides the point.
Cancel that. We're in Croatia.
Split.
Let's go. Sounds fun.
Yeah, let's meet in Split.
Cool. We'll bug you there. We'll fly to Split.
Yeah, don't twist your arm, right?
Or twist it.
All right. So moving on. Next topic. Andrew, are you in the call?
Yeah, he said he was gonna miss this one.
Oh, okay. So let me move his stuff to next. We have quite a few, and we're not going to be able to go through all this today. So let's see. Nick, are you in the call?
Yes, I am. We discussed most of this issue a while ago, I think in April or something. I made a change to the GitOps engine that would allow to skip the dry run for known issues, for known resources. At least that was the idea behind it. After implementing the Argo today changes and doing some tests, I found out that it only worked for CRDs and not for existing resources just like pods and namespaces. So I made a new change in the GitOps engine which moves the skip dry run functionality, and I also added the RCD changes. Good to know is that after my PR was merged, someone else created a new function called skip dry run on missing resource, which was doing basically the same as skip dry run, which was implemented by my previous change. And I added some tests, of course.
Sorry, can you repeat that? So you said we merged one of your PRs that implemented a feature, and after doing that, someone else
Yes.
implemented something else that was not using the functionality you implemented. Is that right?
Yeah, so I created the function skip dry run, which you can see on line
Riz?
846, which was in the error case scenario. And afterwards, someone added a new function which calls these would skip dry run on missing resource, which was doing basically the same. When you're in the error case, this means that the resource type that you're trying to get, which is a couple of lines above the view, that doesn't exist yet. So this functionality was created for CRDs. And my scenario, I would need to skip the dry run for all kind of resources. I need this for the use case of external operators that give permissions after a namespace is created. So in our scenario, we're using Capsule for multi-tenancy. We create a namespace, and when a namespace is created, a role and role bindings are created inside that namespace, allowing tenants to create stuff inside that namespace. With the default behavior of Argo CD, it does a full validation of permissions and will fail because you won't have permission in the namespace yet to create pods and services and all that kind of stuff. I tried, of course, working with presyncs and stuff, but it doesn't work because the validation is the first thing it does. So it does the validation and it fails because of permissions in the namespace that needs to be created first. So it's a kind of race condition. By using the skip dry run, you can skip this validation sort of, which results in the first run creating the namespace, and the second sync would create all the other resources in the namespace.
So
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
And this is general to everyone that may have known. Skip dry run on missing resource is only for CRDs. I thought it was just generic.
Yeah, you can only a CRD can be a missing resource, basically.
Gotcha. So it only checks gotcha. Okay. So I was confused. Okay, or carry on. Sorry, Michael.
Basically any resource, but if the CRD doesn't exist, it doesn't check it.
Yeah, gotcha.
And that function up on line 828, what it does is it says, okay, which resource complained? Cool, it's a resource of group kind XY. Let's go over the entire task and see if we're trying to install a CRD of that group kind. We are. Okay, then we'll just skip the dry run because we know we're going to install that CRD.
Yes.
So this task, I'm still not sure I understand how it solves your problem of failing to create the namespace. So we get a failure because we got a resource that belongs in namespace X, but namespace X doesn't exist yet. So the dry run is like, well, you're out of luck.
Yeah.
So how does this change accomplish basically doing the skip dry run on missing resource for not just missing CRDs, but missing namespaces?
Because of the skip dry run, it continues after the validation of the possibility of creating resources fail. So we can create namespaces. We have permissions to create namespaces. So that step would be successful, but creating the pod in the namespace would fail in the first run. By setting skip dry run, it won't throw the error of permission denied to create the resource, but just will continue. And in the second run, it will have permissions to create the resources because the namespace is created. So you're eventually consistent with your config.
So status quo today, I run the sync operation that you're trying to run. My namespace gets applied or it doesn't get applied?
Sorry?
Does the namespace get created the way Argo CD works today? So I think what's going on in chat is correct. Retries are the solution to this problem because if we try to stack basically what is effectively a retry into the same sync context, it's racy. If your Kyverno or whatever webhook activity is slow for whatever reason, and it doesn't add the permissions quickly enough, then the sync is still going to fail. So as much as the UX is kind of goofy, I prefer sync it, get the namespace out there, let the rest of the operation fail, have whatever retry is reasonable for your environment, and then let the next sync actually work.
Yeah, but the namespace won't be created if you won't set the skip dry run. It will do none of the tasks, won't create anything, or I have to create a new project, a
Okay, then
namespace that creates, of a project that only creates a namespace or something.
then I misunderstood your answer to the first question, which is status quo, does Argo CD successfully apply the namespace when you
Not
run
yet.
this operation? Okay, so that's
No.
the problem. We're not even getting the namespace
Yeah.
out. Okay.
But that feature, the skip dry run feature, is merged today to be able to create the namespace now.
Yeah, but it is in the if statement where you only get when you have a CRD. So the if error isn't nil on line 837, you only get there when you're having a CRD because of the check a little above, I guess.
But skip dry run and skip dry run on missing resource are two different settings.
Yes. Skip dry run on missing resources only works for CRDs.
And you're trying to avoid setting script skip dry run globally because that has negative UX consequences. That makes sense to me. Like you don't want to disable dry run entirely forever just for this edge case, which is why skip dry run on missing resource exists, which takes me to, do we want to expand skip dry run on missing resource to detect missing namespaces and basically do the same thing as it does for CRDs? Do we potentially want to add a new setting, skip dry run on missing namespace?
But
Both of those sound kind of reasonable to me.
sorry, I have not fully understood the problem behind this, because like the dry run will work today if either create namespace is set to true in your application, or if you have a namespace resource within your application's sources, right? So I think that's like
no, it doesn't.
that is working, right?
No, that doesn't work. It doesn't create the namespace, even if you're set to create namespace check.
That's strange because I did this.
Sorry. When? Like, I'm just imagining a normal application, right? Like, let's say a deployment resource and a config map. Let's say that, and I create that application. I set the destination namespace to something that doesn't exist, and I check the auto create namespace. And
yes,
I won't have to check the skip dry run because the namespace does not exist yet, right? So Argo CD has some logic internally to see, okay.
And I ran this exact case yesterday in my local machine, and it worked. So the namespace is created. So I'm having a hard time to understand the use case that we were talking about
right
here.
And then I would like to see like, can you, like, do you have a reproducer repository somewhere, or could you demo that behavior?
Could maybe not today because I have to set up a test environment, but maybe good to know that this issue happens when you're using impersonation. So we're not using the full admin Argo CD permissions, because when you're in full admin Argo CD, you would have permission to create resources in namespaces. But if you're using impersonation, so you're using a service account, that limits your permissions. So
But
that's when you...
Does the service account has permission to create namespace?
Yes.
So, and the service account exists before starting the sync?
Yes, also.
That shouldn't be a problem.
I hope so. Yeah. I can try to make a demo for next time if that works best for you guys. So I can demo the issue.
Yeah, that would be awesome, Nick,
Yeah.
if you can do that. Or if you can present in the next contributors meeting, or you can provide the steps to reproduce as part of this main issue here as well.
Okay, I'll do. I'll do
Okay.
both.
Because
Cool.
the error that you pasted, that seems like a permission error to me, right?
Yeah, that's because
Forbidden.
you do not have permission to create resources inside the namespace that isn't created yet.
It's like, yeah, or even read, right? Cannot get resource services in API group core in the namespace Nick tenant test app. So
Yeah,
to me, like I mean, the use case works if you use the default service account, right? But like
yes,
now, as I understand, if you use impersonation, then it doesn't work. And to me, that is like in my head, it goes like, oh, probably some permission is missing from that service account. Maybe the role cluster role that you gave to that
Yeah, and I guess this is what
service
we're
account.
missing on the steps to reproduce. So if you have a very clear, defined steps to reproduce, I think that will simplify the discussion.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
all right,
because you don't have get permissions on the resource because the permissions are given when the namespace is created. But I will demo it next time. Thank
cool.
you for your time, at least. Yeah.
No, thanks a lot for your effort, Nick. Okay, so next one, Rafa Brito, you're in the call. You have a few topics here. So you want to share? You want me to share? Yeah, please go ahead.
Oh yeah, I'm on the call and I'm trying to solve one simple problem, but this end up requiring multiple touches. So the problem is Argo rollout is using 129, it's end of the life, and I bumped to 130.13, which is still supported until the end of the month. The approach is trying to minimize changes on Argo rollout. I was blocked 2 weeks ago. I came to the call. I got some tips from folks here. I got unblocked, but there was more changes required. I had to update Mockery, I had to refactor one script to use Kubernetes CodeGen. Long story short, now is everything working on my setup when I do make CodeGen. But no matter what I do, or on GitHub Actions is still failing on the very last step to generate the documentation. So the ask here is someone can take a look, try on maybe on an Ubuntu machine or double check what I did. Yeah, the errors. We got more errors than last time. But if you go up just a little bit more, yeah, this is the problem that I got over here, but it's passing on my local machine.
Which one?
Yeah, this one, the CodeGen, verified CodeGen. Go down a little bit.
Go down to the jobs.
This
The
one.
Go verify CodeGen, yeah, that's the one.
Good.
Yeah, before was I even tried to bump Go because that was arguably the only major difference between my setup and GitHub Actions.
It means that the resource committed by your local CodeGen generations differs from the GitHub actions that runs the CodeGen. So it detects that they are uncommitted files, so it fails the check. If you go in the check details, you might have more logs though.
Yeah, there's the very last gendocs. When I run gendocs mango, it's still pointing
This
to
doesn't seem to be related to GenDocs. It seems to be related to the code gen itself, right? It's the protobuf file that is missing some stuff compared to what the CI
mm,
job does internally. So maybe you're missing to run some make targets locally and commit those files. Because
mm,
what is saying here is it's actually a compilation error. The file that you committed, this one for example, it has some compilation error, and this is most likely related to some code generation issue. You see undefined stuff. So the file is broken, basically.
yeah, okay. So what are you suggesting? This is the error from not from the doc generation, but is missing
The thing is the
one.
doc, I'm not familiar. I don't know this by heart. But take a look at the docs. Maybe there's a pre-target configured there. I don't expect the doc to generate this type of error. Not sure. But the problem here is clear, right? So the protobuf uh, file generated, it's broken. Basically, there's a compilation error here, and that's why this specific make target's working. But maybe the problem is even before reaching that point. So it's really how you're generating this rollout protobuf.go from the generated. So there's a binary that generates those
Yeah,
those protobufs.
that's one of the required
Hmm.
changes on the on
Right,
bumping the library.
right.
Um, and the funny thing is, I do see these changes on my local setup, and it's part of the commit, but it's still
It's part of a commit, and in your local, you don't have compilation errors. Is that
no.
what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, then I think it's necessary to investigate it further. Maybe from the CI, we generate those files again, and the binary that generates the file is creating this. I'm not sure. This is just an assumption, but
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, dealing with the task that you're trying to do is not a simple one. This is very complex and expected errors. So like, I guess at this point it's mainly investigating in the CI why this file is having compilation issues.
I'll give it a shot trying to tweak the code gen script again. The thing is, I don't have a Ubuntu box because the script kind of creates a local temp directory, then copy over, then delete, and I just fear is something that works on my Mac, but when it comes to the GitHub CI on Ubuntu is slightly different. One thing for sure is part of the change. This is a new protobuf generated using different functions by Kubernetes CodeGen script because the other one was outdated. And that's why I wonder if someone can just try on an Ubuntu box.
The way I read this message, M spec on Marshall. Something failed to get generated, and probably Cogen deleted a bunch of Go files or generated them in an incomplete way. And then when we finally get to the point where we're running some code that needs to compile this API client, it's like, well, none of this stuff is meeting the interfaces that it's supposed to meet. Um, I need to look at the code that you've committed.
Yeah, it's indeed very strange, right? It's complaining about how the Argo rollouts types are defined. So it's basically saying there's no feeder method, Marshall, blah 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 in this type, but this is generated by CodeGen. So
Yeah.
if you generated this file, if you ran CodeGen and submitted and committed this file and push to Git, it should be there. Maybe in your PR, you're missing to push those files to your PR. Maybe that's it. But
The
yeah,
the
I'm
reason
not
it's
sure.
failing when it gets to docs is the first part of this target that tries to compile the code, and it's failing at compilation because it's running serve docs local, which apparently requires compiling rollouts, and then it hits this.
And it's connected to docs because I moved docs to like right in the beginning. It's a make code gen after they steps. When I moved the docs in the beginning, it failed, right? So it's kind of sort of related to docs. I was a little disappointed because when working on my setup, I high five to myself and I push it. Okay, job is done, but then it failed over there, and I keep chasing this problem since then.
Did
But
you ever take a look at the Argo CD code where we bumped up
I
to the
did, I
okay.
did. But the Argo CD did much more in a certain extent. Um, like Mockery, for example, you guys bump Mockery to 3x. I didn't need to on
Yeah.
this one. I just bumped Mockery to 2, 5x, whatever.
Mhm.
Um,
That makes sense. I wouldn't bother with mockery.
and you guys end up, bumping even to the very modern, I think 132 Kubernetes. I'm trying to do just one bump.
Yeah.
And there's more changes for from 130 to 131 to 132, etc. So it's kind of like determined exactly. Um,
Which comes my question. W- as we're spending the time to have to update this tooling, wouldn't it be better to update to the latest version instead of going to and doing a minimal update and then in the near future we have to do the same job again? Wouldn't it be better to go straight to the latest one?
I like slow stepping it because if we're having this much trouble on one bump, you might get confuse the process with additional changes that are needed. I would be
yeah.
surprised if this were an error that were somehow resolved by skipping
Thing is,
forward.
the tooling might have, improved
Uh,
from the version that you're trying to use here and the latest version. And maybe some of those problems are not going to be there if you use the latest. So that's my mindset.
That's my approach to bump Golang as well.
Hmm.
But Kubernetes. So yesterday I bumped to the Golang 124 and I bumped Kubernetes to 130.13 because it's still supported and being maintained. So if someone find a bug on Kubernetes libraries right now, they still backport to the version I'm trying to get into it. All right, let me see if someone else has a Ubuntu machine I can try. Maybe in my even my customer. And then I'll 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 keep trying. I might have more cycles to put into this.
Yeah. Just from the messages I'm seeing here, it doesn't sound to me like this is Ubuntu related. It feels like it's really some missing files in the PR, stuff like that.
Okay.
All right. Well, it takes a lot for your effort on this. I'll double check with Zach. Zach is the lead in the rollouts project. I'll reach out to him and yeah, get his opinion on this as well. All right, thank you. And we're on time. We're over 7 minutes, so I'll pick the last topic we had and push to the next week. Thanks, everybody, and see you all in next week. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.